Okay, so today's podcast is going to be my story, my addiction, how my addiction started, and I'm going to be going over this for a couple reasons. One, I think it's good for people to hear. Two, I can't tell you how many people I talk to or reach out to me who have similar issues, have similar addictions, have similar struggles, and I talk about this often, but I truly believe it in the bottom of my heart. I think when your addiction starts from a guy in a white coat, there's a certain embarrassment, a certain misunderstanding, if you will, as to why you're in the place that you're in, exactly how you got there. Granted, you know that you may or may not have taken some pills when you shouldn't have taken some pills, may or may not have taken more than you're supposed to take in. But regardless, you didn't start this journey by buying drugs behind a Circle K. You started this journey by walking out of a pharmacy with a prescription. So I think this addiction and the way that it forms and starts and kind of slowly takes hold of your life is a little different than others. So I'm going to talk about my story. I'm going to just kind of share my journey in hopes that it reaches somebody it needs to reach, and that somebody out there can understand and realize that they're not broke, there's nothing wrong with them, that these things are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So my first prescription, or my first set of pain pills, I was in my early 20s, and I believe it was for a knee surgery. And then not that long after that, I had 3 elbow surgeries. And that's when during those 3 elbow surgeries, I got a fair amount of pain pills. That's kind of when I first started realizing I liked how they made me feel. Everything at the beginning was the 5 325 Percocets. So anybody who knows anything about pills, that's 5 milligrams of the actual narcotic and 325 milligrams of Tylenol in each pill. So when you're taking 5, 6 of those, you're taking 1,600 plus milligrams of Tylenol, and that's super dangerous, super unhealthy for you, and it's hard on your stomach. So you get this just bloating feel in your stomach, just this uncomfort in your stomach. So that kind of helps prevent full-on abuse from them, just because of how much Tylenol's in them. But that goes away. You still get your little euphoric feeling, and you're kind of off to the races. So with those, I was in my early 20s, wasn't getting them regularly, was getting them somewhat sporadically just from surgeries and truly as needed for pain. And then from there, I started having more back issues than normal. My back was hurting, so got a few here and there for that. And then several years later, I was probably 24, 25. I don't know exactly how old I was, but I was in my mid-20s, and my shin came out of my leg. Long story, but I was doing Christmas lights. It was windy, a ladder blew over that was on the side of my house. So I was on my roof, my ladder had tipped over, couldn't get down, was home alone. So decided to go to the base of my house, and at that time I lived in Tucson, right at the base of the El Conquistador, or in the El Conquistador, right at the base of that mountain in there. And the back of my house sloped up against the mountain, so there was a minimal amount of jump, or what I thought was jump. I thought my roof was closer to the ground there, so that's where I jumped off. And as soon as I hit, my shin shot out of my leg, my foot ended up backwards, my bone was sticking out, and had to have some plates and screws and stuff put in there, and I started getting a fair amount of pain pills for that, and abused them, slept a lot with those. I was also in a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort, had needles and stuff, pins sticking out of my leg, had stuff that had to be adjusted. Like it was a major surgery. And so, I got quite a few pain pills with that. That kind of is where I realized how much I liked them. I also realized how many I could take rather easily. So I didn't have an addiction at this point. I was certainly abusing them or taking them in ways I shouldn't be taking them, but immediately was justifying it because of the type of injury I had, how severe my injury was, and the reality is I do have a higher tolerance to things, so I would have to take more than some people would have to. So that is kind of the foundation of me getting pain pills and understanding that I like them. Fast forward to my late 20s, and I was starting to get in the world of straight oxys, of low milligram, just oxys, because of my back. Now, I knew I liked how they made me feel. I knew that I was chasing them more because I liked how I felt on them than how much they helped me pain-wise. But still at this point didn't have a full physical addiction. They were kind of like a treat, if you will. Wasn't getting them regularly, would get them every so often, and at 28 or 29 is when I started getting them regularly. 28 or 29, I started seeing a pain management doctor, started getting, I believe it was 90-15s was my first, what I guess you would call big boy dose, or just straight oxy dose. That's where you start abusing them. So at that point, I was taking them more than I should have. My addiction started to form at this point. Wasn't a physical addiction, was more of a mental yearning for it, if you will. And then I don't know exactly how old I was when I got my first prescription of the 30s, but I was early 30s, 32, 33, 31, 32, 33, somewhere in there. And I got introduced to a different pain specialist or pain doctor who was the definition of a pill mill, literally the definition of a pill mill. You had to pay this guy with cash. It was this security place that, they had to buzz you into the door. There's a hole this big in the window for you to slide cash, for them to slide you stuff behind this plexiglass with cameras pointing at you. Like, it was a full-blown pill mill. No insurance, no anything, cash only, just your typical pill mill. In fact, this doctor, his name is Dr. Osborne, he was in Tucson. He ended up getting arrested, losing his license, got raided by the FDA, FBI, ended up in some big trouble, and rightfully so. He knew exactly what he was doing. In fact, I'll talk about what he did when he gave me my first prescription here in a second, but he was who I started seeing when I started getting big boy doses. So from him, I believe I was getting 330s a month and 90-80s a month, 90-80 of the extended releases. That's when it was off to the races. At that point, that's when I was abusing the shit out of them. That's when, if I didn't have them, I started physically getting ill. That's when I slowly started losing control of my addiction. That's when it started getting the upper hand, if you will. So it wasn't until I got introduced to the big boy dosages that I started forming a legit physical addiction. But with this physical addiction comes this mental battle that I think is the biggest issue for people with any kind of a prescription addiction, or any kind of addiction that starts from a prescription. Now, for me, my addiction ended up taking me away from prescriptions and ended up me buying, quite a few pills on the streets, month in and month out. Reason for that is because, my addict brain took over, and I immediately started, I would run out of my prescription in 10 days or 2 weeks. Like it wasn't even 2 weeks, it was 7 to 10 days, and I was out. So I knew I was gonna be sick if I didn't have any. So, again, that started rather innocently, because quite honestly, I wouldn't have known where to go look for pills. So there was a guy I worked with who I knew had them. I did the song and dance that I was hurting, and I left them at home type of thing for a few days. He gave me a few. That turned into, he needed money one day, so dropped, 20 of them on my desk, and was like, give me $100 or something. Like, it was dirt cheap at the time, but I don't think he really realized what he had, and I had no clue how much those things were on the street. I just cared that I got more, and I was good for a little while longer. So that turned into, every month when he got his, I would buy some of them. He was a regular for a while. That led to another guy who I knew, who I worked with, who knew I was taking pills, who told me he could get some. Of course, I reached out to him also and started getting some from him. And fast forward several years later, I had probably a dozen people who I had their name and number in my phone. I could tell you what day they got their script. I could tell you how much they were going to want for them. I could tell you where they would meet me. It was like clockwork. I knew that on this date so-and-so was going to get them. On this day so-and-so was going to get them. And I'm texting these people days before, make sure we meet up, and do you need money to go to your doctor? Like just full-blown revolving my life around these damn things. But I'm going to back up a little bit. And the doctor who started me on the 30s, this is where I have a hard time with our medical system, because this guy knew exactly what he was doing. So after he asked me if I was with the FBI or the FDA or if I was an undercover police officer, and I told him no, he did this bullshit physical on me, had me bend over. Did that hurt? Yeah. Does it hurt if you twist? Yeah. Does it hurt if you do this? Yeah. Okay, you definitely have issues with your back. And wrote me a prescription. And I believe the first prescription was for 315s. I never got that prescription, but it was the exact same strength that I had been getting, just considerably more. And he went to hand it to me and just kind of looked at me and pulled it back and tells me, I'll let you deal with your own demons. That's what the doctor said to me as he's writing this other prescription. I will let you deal with your own demons. I will let you battle your own demons. And writes the prescription. I believe it was 330s. I believe that's what I was getting. I could be wrong on the amount. I know that they were 30s. I don't remember. It's been so long. But writes this prescription, hands it to me, tells me he's going to let me deal with my own demons or battle my own demons, and tells me I'll see you next month. Almost with like a smirk, like, I got you. And sure enough, that was a game changer for me. When that dosage got bumped up to the 30s and I was getting that many, the restraints came off. It was just go time. I went really, really hard at that point, moving forward, and didn't stop until I fully quit them. And so, there was an extended period of time where you find yourself knowing that you have a problem, knowing that a problem is forming, but you justify this in this sick and twisted way because you sit there and tell yourself, I get these from a guy in a white coat. I need these. They can't be that bad for you. I'm getting them from a doctor. I can't function without them. I can't go to work without them. I need these to be me. And you start this just justification in your head of why you need these things in your life. And that went on for years with me. Years and years and years. I had known for probably the last 5 years or so that I had a real problem. And at that point, nobody knew. Nobody knew. I hid it from my wife. I hid it from anybody I worked with, any employees of mine, my employer. I hid it from my family. Now, I'm sure, and as everything's kind of come out, there were, some people who knew something was up with me, that I was just off, that I wasn't quite myself. And, obviously I didn't know how bad I really was or how off I really was. In the midst of my usage, looking back at it, I can see that, there were some signs that I had some issues and stuff, but I truly don't think anybody knew the extent of my problem. I don't think anybody knew that my life really started to revolve around these pills. So, there's this embarrassment because I knew I had a problem, didn't know where to turn, didn't think anybody would understand, and quite frankly, thought there was something wrong with me. Thought that I was broken, that I wasn't right, that there was something wrong inside of me, that I would get so sick without these things, that I would feel so miserable without these things. And mind you, all of this is starting before there's this whole opiate epidemic, okay? All of this is, I quit in 2016, up through 15, I was just opiates. And, I don't know exactly when the whole opiate epidemic started coming out and people started paying attention to it. At the very end, there was a little bit of an awareness, but it wasn't like it is now. It wasn't, everybody's aware of the epidemic that's on our hands. I don't think enough's being done about it, but at least people are aware of it. People know what's going on. So I would spend so many mornings, countless mornings in my office, literally in tears. I used to have to get to my office an hour or so before everybody else got there just so I could get what I needed to get done on my own before my day started, and I got pulled in 100 different directions. So I would get in very early, and I can't tell you how many times I would look in my pill bottle and see that I had 7 left. I didn't have any lined up. So I know, those 7 are going to last me the next 3 hours or 4 hours. And, 4 hours after that, I'm going to start not feeling well. 24 hours after that, I'm going to be full-blown sick, and I'm going to have to come up with some bullshit story as to why I'm sick again, unless I can figure out a way to get some pills. So now all my energy is focused on getting pills, reaching out to people, offering to pay if I need to pay more, offering to take them. And if that meant I left my job to go take somebody to get some pills, that's what I did. If that meant that I met somebody at a parking lot at Walgreens at 11:30 at night, that's what I did. If I had to drive halfway across town to meet somebody because I could get some pills, that's what I did. They literally consumed my life. They literally consumed every area of my life. My life was based around making sure I had pills, getting pills, and making sure that my next set of pills were scheduled and secured and on their way, because without them, I just could not function at that point. So I didn't think anybody would understand what I was going through. I didn't think there was anybody who would understand how addicted I had gotten to these things. I didn't think there was anybody who would understand not just the physical addiction, but the mental side. The feeling you get when you're on these pills, for me, the feeling I would get taking these oxys, these little blue devil pills, is this euphoric feeling of, it's not energy like if you take an energy drink, or if you take an energy pill or take a pre-workout. It's not that kind of an energy, but it's this like euphoric energy where you just feel good. Like, and whatever's thrown at you, you're not worried about it. This happened, okay, great, we'll deal with that. This happened, okay, great, let's handle it. And you just have this confidence and this self-assurance. It's like a security blanket. My pills were like a security blanket. That was one of the hardest things with quitting too, and one of the reasons I refused to even try to come off of them for so long is because I had mentally convinced myself that I was not me without them, that I needed them. So I spent years embarrassed in this just place of being lost, of not thinking anybody would understand what I was going through. And so fast forward a few years later, I ended up losing the job that I had because of my pill use. I remember it very well. I had a couple issues there, and granted, when you're on these things, you're moody, you're up and down, you're all over the place. My performance job-wise never really went down, but my care for my job and the priority I made it did go down. That adjusted, that changed, that wasn't how it was supposed to be. So I ended up losing my job. It was a Monday or Tuesday. We had a big meeting with a banker coming in that had been set for a few weeks, and I ended up calling in sick. And I knew when I did it that was going to be a problem. And later that evening, I got a phone call, and that's when all of that happened. So, and I couldn't go in because I was sick. I couldn't go in because I didn't have any pills, and I was shitting my pants and sweating, and just, when you're going through opiate withdrawals, you can't work. You physically cannot go into an office and work. It would be so blatantly obvious that something's wrong with you. It's not even funny. So, I didn't really have a choice. So I lost my job, ended up not working for about a year, doing, odd and end things, just trying to make some money, drained any money that we had, was still buying my pills on the street. And at the last 4 to 6 months, I got introduced to benzos. Now, benzos I had never taken, didn't even know what Xanax was. In fact, was sitting in a parking lot waiting on some oxys, and one of the ladies I used to get pills from, the guy didn't come with the oxys, and she's like, I've got some Xanax I can give you. And she was like, have you ever taken those? And I was like, I don't even know what those are. And she's like, oh, you're gonna love them. A lot of people who buy pills from me love these things. And they were a lot cheaper than the oxys. And so, at this time I'm a full-blown pill addict, and I'm asking her, are they gonna make me feel better? And she goes, absolutely. So I bought, I don't remember how many, I bought a bunch from her that night, had never taken them. Ended up taking 3 on my ride home, and by the time I got home, I had liked how these things made me feel. I was a big fan of the feeling you got on those. So started justifying that I'm gonna take these to get off of the oxys. And of course, the second that some oxys were available, I now have these and oxys. And when you take opiates and benzos, that's a recipe for death. That's a recipe for disaster. That's when a lot of overdoses happen. That's when you just stop breathing. Your shit just stops because you're so compromised internally. Your body just doesn't breathe. And I came really, really close to stopping breathing countless times. I have videos of myself nodding out. I have videos of myself sitting on the edge of my bed, just completely out of it. I have countless pictures and videos of myself on the edge of my bed. I would go to get up and get out of bed and would end up slumping and just sitting up against my bed for extended periods of time, completely out of it, just because I literally could not move. I was that out of it. And so that was actually a blessing in disguise. Because of that, it shined a light in an area that some light needed to be shined. And that created an awareness to my wife and my family that there was a real issue going on. And that kind of forced the change that, ended up helping me get clean and causing me to stop with, pills completely. So I had, 4, 5, 6 months. I don't quite think it was 6 months. I want to say it was 4 or 5 months of abusing benzos and opiates before I finally got clean. At this time, I'm a full-blown addict. At this time, I'm lying. I never stole from people, but I would mislead people. If there was a way that I could benefit myself and take advantage of you, I would do it. I was just a shitty human being. I was just, it's embarrassing the type of person you become because of addiction. When your life revolves around a substance and that's the only thing that it revolves around, you kind of lose your moral compass, and you do things that you normally wouldn't do because, quite frankly, you're just not yourself. So I ended up full-blown addict, spending thousands of dollars a month on pills, buying pills on the street, buying pills from people I didn't know. Some of the places I went to get pills, some of the amounts of money I lost, because when you're buying pills, they control everything, so meet them here, give them the money in just hopes that they come back with the pills. And, there were a handful of times I would hand somebody $700, $1,500, $1,200, $2,000 and never see them again, and have no way of getting a hold of them, no way of chasing them down. You can't really call the police. Like there's literally nothing you can do. And, that was not an uncommon thing. And I struggled with this internally for a very long time, simply because I knew I had a problem, but I couldn't come to terms with how I had a problem. I couldn't come to terms with the fact that I had this addiction to something that originally had started from a guy in a white coat, that had originally started because I had injuries, that had legitimately started with me walking out of a pharmacy with a prescription in a bag. Fast forward, a decade later, and I'm basically a strung out junkie whose life revolves around opiates. Now, luckily, I never crossed over into the heroin. I came really close several times, mainly because one of the guys I used to buy pills from was constantly in my ear, like, man, just try this. It's the exact same thing you're taking. It's a fraction of the price, and I can get it whenever you want it. And I just could not mentally bring myself to that point, even though there were times that financially things were very tight. There were times that, I chose to buy pills as opposed to pay my house, to pay my car, to pay anything that I should have paid. I chose to get pills. If there was $1,200 in my account, I had and I had $2,500 in bills coming, $1,200 in the account, $2,500 in bills coming, I didn't bat an eye at going to my bank and pulling out $1,000 and going and buying pills with it. Didn't bat an eye. Not an eye. Again, addict's mentality, I'll figure it out. I will figure out a way to pay my bills. I will figure out a way to pay what I need to pay. But right now, my top priority is getting these pills, making sure I have these pills, because without these pills, I'm worthless. So there's this constant mental battle, mental fight that you're going on. And, I want to share that, again, I'd never done any illegal drug in my life. I smoked weed a handful of times in high school. And, we can have the whole weed debate, whether that's a drug or not down the road. But, I never did coke. I was never a big drinker, never did meth, never did ecstasy, never did acid, never did anything. Like I never did a drug. And it was because from a very young age, I had it beat in my head that the chances of me being addicted to things were very high, because I had my grandfather my mom's father was an alcoholic, and on my father's side, my great-grandfather was an alcoholic as well. So I had two alcoholics in my family very closely to me, and from a very young age, I had it beat in my head that if I tried something one time, I could end up addicted, because I have, they didn't call them addicts, but I had addictive tendencies in my family. So I was horrified of anything. So I can tell you very confidently that had somebody given me these pain pills and explained to me, look, there's a good chance you can become addicted to these things. Most people who take them for extended period end up hooked on these things. And, if somebody had explained that to me, I do not think I would have taken them, just because I was truly scared of being addicted to things. So this addiction started very innocently, and it's this slow, gradual process, right? I started with a lower dose that was high in Tylenol, that I liked how they made me feel. So, when it says to take 1 or 2, I'm immediately taking 3 or 4. And then that turns into 6 or 8. And then that turns into, I'm going to take 6 or 8 in the morning, just start my day right. And then 6 or 8 at night to go out. And, when you're prescribed, 30 of them and taking 8 at a time, it's not going to last you very long, And again, at that low dose, the physical addiction wasn't there. There was the mental, I like how this makes me feel, that was there. And so there's always this yearning for this. There's this almost draw to these things in you from the jump. And so I was very quick to explain that I was hurting to a doctor in hopes to get pain pills. I was very quick to, highlight any injuries or anything that I had, simply because I knew that would end up with pain pills. The reason I bring that up is that leads to much worse things. I haven't shared this before, and this is going to be embarrassing to go over, but I would push for surgeries. There were several injuries that I had that the doctor would, tell me, we can do surgery, but, you might be able to fix this if you do this physical therapy, or if you do this, or if we rest it and do this. And I was always a push it for surgery. I know my body, this isn't working how it's supposed to work. I need it fixed, and I would push for surgeries for a couple reasons. One, I knew that I was going to get IV pain medicine. As sick and twisted as that is, I knew that was going to be part of this process. I also knew that I was going to get a prescription of pain pills. So what starts very innocently, and what starts with, I sprained my whatever, and here's a low dose of pain pills. Fast forward that process, or how these things slowly manipulate their way into your life, and fast forward a few years, and I'm pushing for surgery on things that I probably didn't need to have surgery on, because I knew I was going to end up getting pain pills from them. That's how these things work. That's how these things slowly work their way into your life and slowly start taking over things. And even doing that, I wasn't fully physically addicted to these things. I just had this mental drawing to these things, that I wanted them that bad. I liked how they made me feel that badly. So I would push for these kind of things because I knew I would get them. As sick and twisted as that is, that's what I did. I also, used different things to cover up my addiction, that I was just such a piece of shit. So I manipulated what was a brain tumor, or an adenoma on my pituitary, into manipulating my family to thinking that tumor and the medicine I was taking for that tumor, which I never took that medicine, but I manipulated them to believing that that medicine was what was causing me to be sick when I was going through my withdrawals. I would literally be in my bed going through withdrawals. My wife and kids would think that I was sick because I was taking medicine for a tumor. That's where these things lead. That's what this process looks like. It also led to me lying about money, lying to my wife about where money was going, misleading her that I was taking this cash out to do something for her, or buy something for her, or buy something we needed, or pay towards something, when that money was just going towards pills. It wasn't going towards anything else. So these things slowly but surely end up the center of your life, and you will pay whatever cost you need to pay to keep them there until you break free of that addiction. And again, I had a very hard time coming to terms with the fact that I was an addict. I had a very hard time coming to terms with the fact that I'm hooked on these things. Like, I have a full-blown physical addiction to a substance that if I don't have this substance in my system, I'm sick as a dog. And not having a history of quote-unquote drug use, that's a hard thing for somebody to wrap their head around. And since I've been playing in this world, or, since I've been around the world of addiction and kind of put myself out there for people to reach out to, it's not just opiates that are prescription pills that people struggle with. I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me about Adderall. That's just like Oxy's basically the same thing as heroin. Adderall is basically the same thing as meth. If you look at the genetic compounds, the layouts of how these drugs, the similarities are they're exactly the same thing up until the very end. One has a molecule that goes up, one has a molecule that goes down, and it's the same thing when you lay heroin and Oxycontin down. They're almost identical genetic compounds, or the makeup of these substances are almost identical. So I was essentially a heroin addict for full-blown physically for a decade of my life. And that's hard for somebody like me to wrap my head around. And I knew I was addicted. I knew I had a problem. I just didn't know where to turn, didn't know what to do, wasn't fully aware of the process of coming off of them, had no clue what my body was going to go through coming off of them. I just knew that, inside of 24 hours of not having them, I'm starting to feel like complete dog shit. And inside about 36 hours, I'm full-blown sicker than a dog. Like, just sicker than a dog, sweating to death, shitting my brains out, nose is running, shaking, I'm hot, and then I'm cold, and then I'm hot, and then I'm cold, and I'm sweating. You have no energy, you can't move, everything hurts, you literally just want to die. I can't tell you how many times I would lay on a bathroom floor, or I would lay on the side of my bed and just pray that God just take me. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this dance, and that's why I want to do this, because there are people who reach out to me and have a hard time even coming out to their family that they're addicted, because it's a prescription. And so, we classify drugs that we get from a medical professional as safe and as good for us, because when we're young, we're instructed that what the doctor says you do. We're not instructed to look into things on our own, or to think for ourselves, or to research shit on our own. We're instructed that if the doctor says to take this or do this, you do that. And so, my life revolved around a substance that had started with a doctor. I had turned into the biggest piece of shit in the world because of these things. I was a liar. I was a manipulator. I was not a good human being. If I could benefit myself and hurt you, I didn't care. All because of a doctor writing me a prescription, knowing what was going to happen. When I got my first prescription of the 30s, and that doctor said, "I'll let you deal with your own demons," he knew exactly what he was doing when he handed me that piece of paper. He knew exactly what my life was going to look like handing me that prescription. He knew exactly what handing me that piece of paper was going to cause in my life. He knew exactly what he was doing, and still did it, because to him, getting that $200 a month from me every month was more important than my health or my well-being or what my life would look like 6 months down the road after being given this prescription. And, you know, looking back at it, going to his office, there was an office full of addicts in there. There was an office full of addicts. Every time I went in there, there was somebody trying to get in earlier, somebody trying to explain that they needed more pills, that they had lost them, or that their car got repossessed and their pills were in their car. I remember that there was a lady in the office crying, trying to get the doctor to come see her. The doctor wouldn't see her. They were trying to get her to leave, threatened to call the police, and she's crying that her car got repossessed and she doesn't have her pills and she needs her pills. And I can relate to that. I've done some shady shit to get pills. I've lied about pills being stolen. I've gone as far as, I don't know if I can admit some of the stuff that I've done, but I've gone as far as reporting things, if you know what I mean, that didn't actually happen, so that I had a report that I could bring to a doctor to explain that, you know, look, this legitimately happened. I need more pills. I've gone to urgent care so many times with either a real injury or a fake injury, and the real injury was never a quarter of as bad as I made it out to be, but I knew if I played it up, I had a good chance of getting some pills. And even though that is a 5 or 6 hour process, even though you're not going to get very many, you're going to get, you know, 15 of them, you just get a few when you go through an urgent care or an emergency room. It's not like they give you a month's supply, they just give you enough to carry you over until you can get into your real doctor. Even with all those things factored in, I still did it. I still did it regularly. And so, you know, I want to get this out there, and I want to share this because I know I'm not the only one, especially over the last few weeks with some of the people who have reached out to me and some of the stories that they've shared. I know I'm not the only one. I know that there's people out there that are hooked on a substance and don't fully understand how it started. And I want to tell you, there's nothing wrong with you. These drugs, these pills that we are given are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to have you right where they have you. They're supposed to have you wanting more. They're supposed to have you scared of coming off of them. They're supposed to have you worried about what your life looks like without these in your body. That's what they're designed to do. Our medical system, I talk about this all the time, but our medical system is geared towards building customers, not actually fixing people or making people healthy. There's no money in healthy people. That's not, you don't monetize off of healthy people, you monetize off of sick people. And so everything in our world is based off of money, and our medical system is no different. And so that's a big part of the reason we're so quick to write prescriptions to people. A pill solves everything. You know, we have, you know, opiates that are prescribed, we have benzos that are prescribed, we have antipsychotic medicines that are prescribed, we have, you know, ADD medicines that are prescribed, we have, you know, all these antipsychotics, you know, depression medicines, and then you have sleep medicines. You know, some of these sleep medicines are as dangerous as anything. You have this whole array of drugs that are so easily prescribed. All you have to do is walk in and say, you know, you get stressed in large groups of people, you have a hard time sleeping, that this hurts, that you can't focus, that you know, try to sit down and do something and your brain's pulled in 12 different directions. All of these things happen to everybody. But because of how our medical system is, all of these things give you the right to be prescribed a certain type of narcotic. And that's a big problem. So there are millions of people out there right now hooked on a prescription pill that they don't quite know how to even begin to deal with the fact that they're addicted to a prescription. Just the fact that they are addicted to a prescription is a mind fuck on its own. And then you start going into the details of it, and then you start going into the physical withdrawals of it, then you start going into the mental side of coming off of that substance. And it's just so much easier to just stay taking them. It honestly is. It's much easier to keep getting your prescription than it is to come off of them. With that said, it's so much better coming off of them. You know, I say this to people all the time, but I wish there was a magic pill that I could give people so that they could see what their life would look like a year from now if they got clean. How they would feel about themselves, what their life would look like, how much better off they would be. I do not wish there is a magic pill that would heal them from their addiction. I do not wish there was a magic pill that I could give them and they're not addicted and they're clean and they move forward and they don't ever use it again. And that sounds crazy, but there's a reason for that. And the reason for that is when you walk through an addiction, when you do the work on yourself to heal yourself from an addiction, there is a beauty on the other side of that is hard to put into words. There is a beauty and a sense of accomplishment on the other side of that hard work that is the most beautiful thing you'll ever do in your life. The best thing you will ever do for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones. It's a beautiful thing. But you have to do that work for that beauty to be there. You have to walk through that fire. You have to get so honest with yourself, and you have to sit and not only self-evaluate, but you have to sit and talk with your demons. You have to understand why they're there. You have to understand what they're feeding on. You have to understand exactly what you're running from, what you're avoiding, what you're hiding. What is it in your life that it's so much easier to take this pill than it is to sit in the real world, than it is to sit and deal with whatever this is. And if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to walk through that, if you're willing to do that work, on the other side of that work is a beauty that's hard to put into words. But that work is tough. That work is hard. But that work is also the best thing you'll ever do for yourself. So I just want you to know you're not broke. There's nothing wrong with you. I've been there. I spent years there. It's embarrassing. It's hard. There's a lot of stuff during my addiction I'm not very proud of. A lot of stuff. And maybe one of these days I'll go into detail on some of that. But right now I just want somebody out there needs to know that they're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. These drugs are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. You can't stop. It's not going to be easy. You're in for the fight of your life. And trust me when I tell you, you are in for the fight of your life. But nothing good comes easy. Nothing worthwhile is handed to you. And on the other side of this journey, of this process, you will be so grateful and thankful and proud of yourself. You know, I mentioned this a week or so ago, but I was literally 40 years old before I could look in the mirror and like what I saw. And that's because of my addiction. I pissed away my 30s. My entire 30s I was on oxys. My entire 30s. And I hated myself on them. I hated who I'd become. I knew I hated who I'd become. I put on this facade like I liked myself. I put on this facade of this successful business guy who had it all together. On the inside I was dead. I was fucking dead. I didn't know who to turn to. Didn't know if there was anybody in the world I could turn to. Didn't fully understand what had happened to me. Just knew that over the course of several years, these little blue fucking things ended up the center of my life. Not just the center of my life, but ended up me having to create a life of a facade, a life of constant lies, a life of constant deceit, a life of constant bullshit. And it's exhausting. You know, I am asked several times a month, you know, what's the best thing since I've been clean? You know, aside from the physical side of things, what's the best thing? And I say that all the time. My life not revolving around these pills, and people don't realize fully what that looks like. Not only is every day, all day focused around these pills, making sure you have these pills, making sure you have enough for today, but tomorrow and the next day, and okay, I'm gonna run out in 2 days, so I need to start figuring this out now so that I'm not sick in 2 days or a day and a half. And there's also the side of all the lies, all the deceit, all the bullshit you're telling people. I had so many lies and so much deceit in my life when I was an active user. It's crazy. And it's nice because since I've removed those things, I don't say this in an arrogant way, but I'm one of the most honest people I know. I don't lie about anything. I don't have anything to lie about. That's a good feeling. And all of that led to me being able to actually look in the mirror and like myself. For me to get to a point where I could do that, I had to sit with those demons. I had to walk through that storm. I had to truly understand what I was masking, what I was running from, what I didn't want to deal with. What was it with me that it was so much easier to take these than to sit with this? And sitting with this is tough. Whatever that this is for you, it's not an easy thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do, but it's a must. It's a must do. It's not an option. It's something you have to do. Life is ugly. All of us have some shit done to us that we don't deserve or that's not fair, but nobody said life is going to be fair. And it's not. Life isn't fair. There's a lot of bullshit thrown at us, a lot of things that happen to us that we don't understand or that we don't think are right or fair or any of that, but nobody ever said life is fair. It's the opposite of fair. So if you're in a place where you're hooked on something that started with a doctor, I don't care if you're a heroin addict, if it started with pain pills, this is for you too. When your addiction starts from a guy in a white coat, it's different than another addiction. And I don't give a shit what anybody says. I can't stress this enough. Your addiction starts from somebody who you're supposed to listen to, somebody you're supposed to trust. Granted, I made a lot of poor choices. I did a lot of things that contributed to my addiction forming. But take all of that away. At its core, it started from a guy who I'm supposed to trust handing me a prescription. At its root, that's where it started, okay? Had that never happened, had that prescription never been signed and handed to me, I wouldn't have had the addiction I did. Now, that's not negating the fact that I did so many things I should not have done. That's not me ignoring the part I played in forming my addiction and the choices I made during my addiction. That's not me negating that or brushing that off by any stretch of the imagination. That's me just simply stating a fact that this addiction wouldn't have started had that doctor never handed me that prescription. That's just the truth. It would have never started had he never handed me that fucking piece of paper. Ever. I wasn't the kind of guy who was going to go out and buy drugs on the street. I wasn't the kind of guy who was going to do that. That's just not who I was. So this starts very innocently and gets out of control very quickly. And it feels like the blink of an eye and you're in this position that you have no clue how you got there. If you're there, it's okay. Reach out to me. If it's not me, find a rehab center, find a detox place, find a family member, find somebody you trust, and at least let them know what's going on. Let them know that what you're struggling with. Let them know what you're battling internally, because it's not going to be as embarrassing as you think it is. In fact, it's not going to be embarrassing. It takes so much strength in such a solid human being to actually face their addiction, to actually reach out for help and to actually take that first step and say, man, I'm fucked up. I need help. I don't know how I got here. I don't know what my next step is. I just know I can't keep living like this. And if you're in that place, make today the day that you stop. Make today the day that you reach out to somebody. Make today the day that this healing process starts. Because I've been where you are. I know that darkness. I know that pain. It's such a fucking miserable way to live. And you don't have to live there. You do not have to live there anymore. You can change, it can get better. It's not an easy thing to do, but it can happen. You have to take that first step. You have to strap in because you're in for the fight of your life. But I promise you it gets so much better and it is so worth it. So if you're in that place, reach out. Reach out now. You don't have to stay there. It can get better, it can change, and there's nothing wrong with you. These drugs are doing exactly what they're designed to do. So stop feeling like you have something to be embarrassed about. Stop feeling like you did something wrong. Stop feeling like it's just you. There are millions of people in the exact same position you're in. There are millions of people who were in the exact same situation I am. This is why I do what I do, because I know how many people are out there. I get messages from these people. I have people reach out to me. I have people say things to me. There's a lot of people who you probably know who are hooked on drugs that you have no clue they're hooked on drugs. There's a lot of closet pill users out there, a lot of them, and they're miserable. So stop hiding, stop the facade. Your loved ones and your family knows a lot more than you think they do, I promise you that. And just reach out, just stop the bullshit. Reach out, get help, and make the change that you need to make. It's time. It's worth it. You're worth it. And there's nothing wrong with you. You can fix this. It's not easy, but you can fix this. So do that. Go fix this. Stop the bullshit. I know how exhausted you are living this way. I've been there. I know how exhausting it is. You don't have to feel like this anymore. So make today the day that you stop this shit.